Support for this podcast comes from the law firm of Davis Malm. Whether you're a developer, property owner, manager, or commercial tenant, their real estate attorneys know the lay of the land, not just the law. Learn more at davismalm.com.
WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. WBUR investigations correspondent Todd Wallach, welcome back to The Common.
Hey, glad to be on again.
Yes. Well, you're back because we need an update. Last fall, you did an investigation where you looked into the wait list for Massachusetts public housing. And despite there being a record housing shortage in the state, you found that almost 2,300 state-funded units were vacant, some for years. And it seems state officials caught wind of your story because shortly after it was published, they announced that they were going to make a 90-day push to significantly reduce the number of empty units. And that brings us to today, Todd. Nearly 6 months after this announcement, we want to know, how did they do?
Yes, both state and local officials were appalled when they heard that there were so many subsidized apartments around the state sitting empty. And you're right, they promised to take a number of steps to try to fix them. So we were curious, where do things stand now? So we checked, and we got the latest data, and they're now 2,219 units still sitting vacant. That's a reduction of only 72 apartments since we last got data at the end of July.
All right, before we dive into that number, because it seems very underwhelming, what were the exact challenges the state was facing before when you did your initial investigation? Why were those nearly 2,300 units vacant?
Sure, there were lots of reasons why there are all these units sitting vacant. One of the problems is the state wait list. It used to be that local agencies all managed their own wait lists, but the state changed that 5 years ago. It was supposed to make it easier for people to sign up so they could go to one place and also avoid concerns about local corruption because the state would be monitoring it. They'd all be using a system. They couldn't just give cheap houses to their buddies. And so there are a lot of good reasons to make the change, but it hasn't worked very well. Local housing agencies across the state say it's far too difficult to find tenants. A lot of the information in the system's outdated. They can't reach people, that no one guides them in how to fill out the forms. And so a lot of the information's wrong. People don't actually qualify. It's become a big mess.
And that brings us to today. What steps have they taken to address that so that they could start to fill those units?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things they did is they hired an outside company called Archipelago to go through this huge backlog of requests for priority to move up the wait list. There was a backlog of 45,000 requests. And the company has slowly started moving through that backlog, but it didn't fix the underlying problem, which is you still have 180,000 people on the wait list. Many have signed up for dozens and dozens of places. Local agencies still are required to do most of the vetting to make sure they can reach the people, that they actually qualify for the units, that they're even interested in going to that community. And there's still no upfront screening being done. There's nobody that helps make sure that people fill out the form correctly. And there's this big backlog of people waiting for units, and much of the information is incorrect.
I wonder if any state officials are aware of this at this point. Like, what are they saying for themselves about 6 months later?
Yes. So I talked to Housing Secretary Ed Augustus, and he said they're never going to be able to fill all the units.
There's a certain amount of the vacancies that are just normal churn, that families or individuals leave, and then it takes some period of time to, position them for the next occupants.
But after I wound up talking to Ed Augustus and sent follow-up questions, the state wound up sending an email to local housing directors across the state where they admitted they are far short of their goals. In the medium term, they're hoping to eliminate another couple hundred vacancies, and in the long term, more than 1,000, because they acknowledge that not all of the vacancies are because of normal churn.
Yeah, talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, clearly there's some people who are always going to leave, and it takes a little bit of time to refill those units. But more than 3/4 have been vacant more than 60 days, which is the usual deadline the state has to fill units. A lot of that's the wait list, but it's not only the wait list. There are more than 100 units that local housing authorities have converted into storage and offices, using for other reasons. The state so far hasn't done anything to correct that. Ed Augustus said he's asked his team to take a hard look at what housing agencies are doing with those vacant units and make sure they're vacant for a good reason. And another bigger challenge is a lot of the units are in disrepair. Some are uninhabitable, and some have repair projects that have been planned for a while or in the future, and it's just really slow going, and it's taking years, and often those units are sitting vacant in the meantime.
Todd, you just gave us a lot right there. I want to take a quick break here and come back to that, especially the point you bring up about the repurposed units. But we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Politics has never been stranger or more online, which is why the politics team at Wired is making a new show, Wired Politics Lab. It's all about how to navigate the endless stream of news and information and what to look out for. Each week on the show, we'll dig into far-right platforms, AI chatbots, influencer campaigns, and so much more. Wired Politics Lab launches Thursday, April 11th. Follow the show wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back with WBUR investigations correspondent Todd Waller. So, Todd, we're talking about your reporting on the state's progress, or lack thereof, in filling the nearly 2,300 vacant units of state public housing. You just said that of all the vacant units, some of those units have been repurposed, right? Some have been repurposed for offices. Now, you just said that those units still remain. Why have those not been filled by tenants? Like, why are they still able to use those spaces for something other than housing?
Well, the state has given local housing agencies, and there are a lot of them, there are about 230 across the state, discretion on how to use those units. And some say they need to use them for, say, laundry rooms to make it easier for tenants. Some say they need office space. Some say they need storage.
It still seems a little outrageous that we're here about 6 months later. I mean, did you talk to anybody who is waiting for housing, who's on one of those wait lists?
Yeah, absolutely. I talked to a woman, Graciela Carter, in Northampton, and she has a 5-year-old. She's been on the wait list since her son Oscar was a few months old. She's been on the wait list for 5 years, and she still has no idea when she'll get a unit. And meanwhile, she's gotten evicted from her apartment after she got in a car wreck and couldn't work for a while and fell behind on rent. She's couch surfing and staying in living rooms, and there's not a lot of space for her.
It doesn't matter where we stay. Oscar's always on a couch. Sometimes I'm lucky enough to be on a couch with him. Other times...
Mommy. You're in a chair?
Mom. Or just sitting up. Like, I might be on the couch with him, but I'm sitting up.
What does she have to say about the state's efforts to fill the units?
She was appalled when she found out that there are all these units sitting empty, including places where she's been on the wait list.
Like, what can I say? You guys have the vacancies. I can't make anyone give me an apartment. All I can do is apply. But if no one offers me an apartment and you have just vacant units, like, it's clear that it's broken. Like, I would move to Agawam today. Have them call me. I will move today. I don't care. You could tell me you can never go to Northampton again. I'm like, as long as I can finish school, I'll never go back to Northampton again. I don't care. I don't care about the location as long as there's stability.
What are you hearing from housing authorities around the state?
When I talk to a lot of local housing officials, they say the state needs to do a lot more. So, for instance, I talked to Maureen Kerr, who's the head of the Agawam Housing Authority near Springfield, and she pointed out that she has 2 side-by-side, 3-bedroom apartments that have been sitting empty since 2021. And these are not units that need renovations. They're units ready to move into. She also has 7 two-bedroom apartments, like the kind that Graciela Carter and her son could really use. And so she is really frustrated because of problems with the wait list that she hasn't been able to fill those units.
It is a failure. It's a failure for the state. It's a failure for the system. It's a failure for the housing authority.
And she's not alone. For instance, when I talked to Kevin Spardella, he runs the housing authority down in Fall River on the South Coast. He said that he has 22 units that he thinks are vacant because of problems with the state wait list. He said he hasn't been able to find tenants.
If I could just go local, I'd fill my vacancies up in a week. 1 week, I could fill those vacancies.
So both he and Maureen Kerr in Agawam wish they could go back to local lists because the state wait list has been such a problem. Not everyone agrees. I also talked to Housing Works President John LaBella. His company also operates wait lists for private and nonprofit landlords. He thinks that a state wait list isn't a bad idea, but the way the state did it is problematic and needs to be fixed.
First of all, the CHAMP system's way too hard to use. It requires a master's degree in education. You have to read a massive amount of text to get through the application.
The state wait list is called CHAMP that he was referring to. So as he said, he thinks it just needs to be completely redesigned. So one way or the other, people I'm talking to say there needs to be much more fundamental changes in order to fill all these empty units so people like Graciela Carter and her son have someplace to go.
What's next?
Well, the state also said that it's making additional changes to try to help fill those units after I talked to Ed Augustus, the housing secretary. One of them is that they're going to continue to make additional funding available to agencies with high vacancy rates and help them. They are also going to try to monitor vacancies much more closely and see what other steps they can do to try to fill those units. It's not going to be fixed overnight, but the state is really aware of it now and says that they are taking steps to try to correct it.
Todd, as always, man, it's a pleasure. Thank you for coming through and talking to us about this very important investigation. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking the time. It's a really important issue. It affects a lot of people who desperately need housing, and so I'm really glad to have the opportunity.
And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. If you like what you're hearing, head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts, especially Apple or Spotify. Rate and review us. Let us know how you're liking the show. Thank you to everybody who's already done it. And with that, I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I will talk to you tomorrow.